Okay. Hello, everybody. Thank you for joining us today. This is our fourth conversation in a series of conversations we've been doing on community suicide prevention, and really excited. Oh, here. I feel like I'm frozen on my end.
Not on my end.
Not on your end? Okay.
No.
Keep going there. Perfect. Sorry. So we're doing community conversations. This is our fourth one that we've done. Some of you have joined us for some of our past ones, and we're really excited to have Taylor and Blair here from Engage Nova Scotia. I am just going to share my screen here, and for some reason, on my end, I'm the one having internet troubles today, so that we will make it through. Okay. So you should be able to see that in. All right. So just for those that are maybe new to Roots of Hope, I'll just give a brief introduction of what Roots of Hope is about. It's a community-based suicide prevention project. It's been initiated by the Mental Health Commission of Canada, and we've been piloting the project in the Northern Zone. However, a lot of our work does creep out into other areas of the province, and always open to having conversation with those that are around the province, around suicide prevention, and what we're doing to support those who are contemplating in our community, as well as those that are for grieving from suicide. I wanted to start off today with a land acknowledgement here, and to acknowledge that we are situated in Mi'kma'ki, the unceded and ancestral territory of the Mi'kmaq people. Unceded means that the Mi'kmaq people had never relinquished, sold, traded, or transferred ownership of their land to the European settlers or colonies, yet land was taken over without their consent through various processes of settler colonialism. This territory is covered by the treaties of peace and friendship, which the Mi'kmaq and Wolastoqey people first signed with the British Crown in 1726. These treaties did not involve the surrendering of rights to the land and resources they have traditionally used and occupied. We are all treaty people. And I want to further acknowledge that Nova Scotia is the birthplace of Black culture and heritage in Canada. People have shared these lands for over 400 years, and over 50 strong and resourceful African and Nova Scotian communities exist today. And in this context of community suicide prevention, I recognize that the role of colonialism has played in the suicidality of Indigenous people, African Nova Scotians, the two do better in how we understand and take responsibility for these practices, and that these practices need to change in order that these communities are not put at risk. So also want to be mindful that we have folks that have lived experience in our space today, that may be grieving from suicide or may have contemplated, and that we should all take good care of ourselves. This session is being recorded, so if you need to step away, if you need to take a break, then there's space to do that. I offer these crisis lines as well, if they are helpful to you, and then the Talk Canada Suicide website as well, which is full of resources. I'll also be staying on after we finish the conversation today for anybody who might need to brief or talk afterwards. And just to kind of put some context of why are we doing these research conversations, and how does it fit into our work with Roots of Hope? Roots of Hope has 5 tiers that we work on, and these tiers come from the World Health Organization, in understanding how we should guide our work around community suicide prevention. So one area is around special support, so specialized supports. What do we do to support those through programs and services in our communities, training and networks to build capacity in our communities, public awareness campaigns to help reduce the stigma of suicide, means restrictions to limit the ways that people may try to end their lives, and the final one, research, which is what brings us here today, in that much of our research around suicide prevention sits in medical models, as well as understanding things through interventions that we have actually not as much understanding of what it looks like for communities and how communities help support suicide prevention. So we're hoping to build our understanding through research with that. And just so that you know who's here, I always just like to let people know who's kind of in the space. So we have quite a few number of people who come from the nonprofit organizations, those with lived experience. Quite a few have mental health professional backgrounds in different capacities, and a good number is just interested in what community-based research looks like and curious about Engage Nova Scotia's data. So we're happy to share that. And the majority of us are coming from the central zone, so the Halifax, HRM area, and a good number coming from the northern zone, which is where Roots of Hope is based, a few from the western zone. And we really need to work better on connecting with folks in the eastern zone. So that is on my list of priorities moving forward. And just for Taylor and Blair and Chris's understanding too, so we've got a somewhat and slightly familiar understanding. So a few of us have a really good understanding of the quality of life data and the work that Engage Nova Scotia has been doing. And for quite a few of us, it's a new area to explore and to understand. So for this conversation, we're doing things a little bit differently. In case you've been to some of the other conversations, Taylor's going to be talking about the quality of life data and the protective factors around suicide prevention and what she's been able to uncover through the quality of life data. And then Blair's going to be joining us around 12 o'clock and talk about how we can use the Engage Nova Scotia quality of life data to help inform our work in communities. And then we'll have a final 10 minutes of questions. And that, if people have questions throughout, just throw them in the chat and we'll try to get them throughout the presentation as well. And I'm going to shortly hand it over to Taylor, and I'm just so excited to hear what she has to say. But I want to just let people know that in preparing for this conversation, Taylor and I had some conversations about risk factors of suicide and then protective factors. And often when we look at suicide prevention, we focus on the risk factors. So you can see on the left-hand side here, a number of things that a lot of the current research actually situates itself in. And these are areas that it can be challenging for community organizations and community work to really have a strong place hold in, as people have already experienced trauma and harm, and sometimes clinical interventions are the best way to address these issues. But when we look at the protective factors, things around close, caring friends, overall resistance, neighborhood safety, caring adults, and that these are areas that community very much has a role to play in how we support those that are contemplating grieving from suicide. So Taylor and I have had some conversation around that, and I've looked at some of the research around protective factors and have used that as a foundation to kind of move our conversation today with the quality of life data. And so, no further ado, I'm going to introduce Taylor, and Blair will be with us shortly. Taylor Hill is a PhD student in experimental psychology at Dalhousie University. Her research is on mental health promotion from a socio-ecological lens and includes methods such as implementation science and knowledge translation. She's particularly interested in evaluating mental health-related policies and programs with the goal of providing the evidence needed to strengthen future policy and programming to promote mental health. Taylor is the research coordinator and data analysis at Engage Nova Scotia. And Blair, who will be joining us shortly, works as a Sustainable Development Goals Program Director, and they are dedicated to supporting Nova Scotians and is passionate about exploring the Sustainable Development Goals as a frame for understanding how we can improve the quality of life. They've studied international development studies, Indigenous studies and anthropology at McGill University, and they are a current board member of Future on 20 and an amateur woodcarver. So I think I'm going to stop sharing there. Okay, welcome Taylor. How are you doing?
Good. Apologies in advance for one of my cats here. I was in Vermont on the weekend, and she spent yesterday punishing me for going away, and now is being quite needy. So I used to try to hide her, but I guess that's not really the nature of working from home anymore. So now I just let her be disruptive.
Okay.
Okay. So Shauna, am I good to go?
You are good to go. We're all ears, Taylor.
Great, thanks. So hi everyone, I'm the research and data lead at Engage Nova Scotia. My title did change in the week between finalizing this and now, so that's why it sounds a little different. And I'm also a PhD student at Dalhousie. So my work generally in research is in mental health and well-being, kind of methods and statistics heavy, and I come to engage to really oversee the data related to the quality of life survey. So I'm going to tell you about the quality of life initiative with Engage. Specifically, I'm going to talk about what Engage is briefly, and I'll talk about the Nova Scotia Quality of Life Initiative. So we'll talk about the 2019 quality of life data set, and specifically we'll talk about who's represented in the data, some relevant variables to work in community suicide prevention. We'll talk about the well-being mapping tool, which is online and public. And then we'll talk about if there's interest, how you can request custom analysis or the data set itself. And I'm going to show some summary results specific to two groups. We'll talk about older adults in Nova Scotia, as well as those who are new to the community. And then I'm also going to give a snapshot of quality of life in the Northern Zone, as this is where Roots of Hope is. So Engage has been around for just over 10 years now. Our 10th birthday was this summer. And the idea behind Engage is that we want a more vibrant, equitable, inclusive, and resilient Nova Scotia. We're a small nonprofit. I think there's 8 of us now. And since about 2017, the Quality of Life Initiative has pretty much been the center of what we do. And at the heart of this Quality of Life Initiative is a survey that we conducted. It was conducted right before the pandemic, so it was, and it's based on the Canadian Index of Wellbeing, is housed at UWaterloo, grounded framework for measuring community well-being and quality of life survey. So in summer of 2019, there was 80,000 households that were invited to participate in the survey. This led to about a 16% response rate, or almost 13,000 actual households across Nova Scotia. And there was specific targeting so that it wasn't, just HRM, which happens a lot when people survey in Nova Scotia. So you can see that HRM, which is the brightest yellow, is about a third of our sample size. And then we also have quite a big chunk of participants coming from Cape Breton Regional Municipality, and then almost kind of equally spread across the rest of these 10 regions. You did have to be over 16 years of age to participate in the survey. So we don't have youth specifically, but we do have parents of youth, because that was one of the questions we asked. There is right now, actually recently finished a child and youth survey that was based similarly on the CIW survey, but ours actually ranges from 16 to, there's actually someone who's 100 who participated. And the survey itself is 230 questions, and with these 13,000 Nova Scotians who actually answered, it leaves us with about 300,000 data points. And we also have survey weights that are created by Statistics Canada, as well as the Canadian Index of Wellbeing, which allows us to describe beyond just the sample of human beings we have to talk about actually about 85% of Nova Scotia. So a lot of the data that we present is representative of about 780,000 Nova Scotians. So this is a slide that we call the What's Possible slide, and it really shows how you can slice and dice all of the different questions and domains across a number of demographic or personal characteristic variables. So the Canadian Index of Wellbeing's framework is divided by these 8 domains, so starting with community vitality and ending with time use. And then that black bar at the top is just a sample of the demographic questions that were asked. The demographic questionnaire is actually the largest part of the survey. So there is a number of different ways to get at an intersectional lens and to look at different groups of people. This is one of the data visualization tools that we've created that is available online on our website. And it's useful when you want to look at survey results that kind of makes sense to look at on a geographic or spatial level. So, for example, a lot of community level variables, it makes sense to look at them on a map. If you're looking at access to healthcare or use of recreation and leisure facilities. You can look at it by FSA, which is the first 3 digits of a postal code, or you can look at it by grouping together particular, about 100 or 150 variables loaded in here. So not so much the demographic variables, but a lot of the actual survey framework kind of content variables are here. And I showed this because I used it in order to show survey results by the northern zone. So instead of by grouping, instead of by going with just the region itself, I actually grouped different communities across the northern zone using this tool. And I'll be showing you some results relevant to that. So I'm going to show some results for older adults. And in preparing for this, mine and Shauna's idea was that we could almost use a case study approach. We could look at particular groups of people and then look at in the literature what the protective factors are for that group and kind of organize the data that way so that we can kind of tell how present any mental health promoting factors are for this group in Nova Scotia. So the way that I've organized the results is that we generally compare groups to the province overall. It serves as a kind of consistent benchmark when we're looking at particular demographic groups or regions. We look at it in relation to kind of everyone else just to see how people are doing. And so based on a literature review, we saw that a protective factor for older adults is social support and connection and social networks. And so generally in the survey, Nova Scotians defined as those who are over the age of 65 are actually doing quite well in Nova Scotia. So through the data, we can see that they are 2 times more likely to report having adequate time to spend with others. This is in relation to their family overall, to their children, or to their partner. They have 2 times more likely to have time to form and sustain relationships. They are 30% more likely to have good friends in the community, and they're actually 2.5 times more likely to report having the time to be active in the community. They're also more likely to stop and talk to people in the neighborhood, to feel at ease with people in the neighborhood, to feel that their needs are met by their community, and to feel that those in the community would give help if they needed it. The color coding that you see in these boxes represent the 8 domains that actually got cut off a little bit here. But the pink is for community vitality, and then the red is for time adequacy. So just to keep things clear so that you know where these questions are coming from, you can kind of match them as best as you can see where it's cut off to the specific domain. Another protective factor was engaging in self-care, including physical activity and other forms of self-care. And so for older adults, we saw that they engage in sports and other high impact physical activity. So whether that's vigorous activity or sports, a lot less often than the rest of the province, than their kind of younger counterparts. But they say that they engage in physical activity as about the same rate. So they don't do as much vigorous team sports, but they do exercise at about the same rate. They also experience far less barriers to using recreation and leisure facilities in the community. So they report that cost is not as big of a barrier, that they find facilities are easy to get to. They're 2 times more likely to even have time to exercise. So there's less barriers to accessing physical activity facilities and recreation and leisure. But they tend to participate in kind of solitude, physical exercise rather than in things like team sports or vigorous exercise. So with these 2 protective factors in mind, we were curious that what programs or services do you think a community might be able to offer to reduce suicidality for older adults? So based on the fact that the first protective factor is anything to do with social connections, they're doing pretty well in that regard, as well as physical activity and other self-care, where they report much less barriers to this, but also aren't participating in kind of group sport as much as younger adults. And rather than going into a breakout group or anything, I'm hoping that you could just pop something into the chat if you had a thought about this or any sort of reflection or reaction to the results that I've shared so far.
Hi, Blair. Just welcoming Blair into our space. Good to see you. Yeah, so Taylor, it's really interesting, and I think some of our conversation when preparing for this conversation was around, understanding how these protective factors influence, how people experience suicidality in the community. So, I want to bring out awareness that we do lose older adults to suicide in our community, and and then the social isolation piece, it can be a huge way that we can help provide that protection, against that group there. Financial security is also can be a concern for some older adults like that. So yeah, curious. So we have a question here from Duncan. How do they feel in terms of alignment and purpose in the community? So how do older adults feel in terms of alignment and purpose in the community? Is that something that the Engage Nova Scotia measures with the quality of life data, or any insights?
Yeah, we generally, we don't have specific terms in terms of alignment or purpose, but we do have questions about sense of belonging to the community, including like your social climate and bonds, feeling like your needs are fulfilled and that there will be help in case of need. And it varies by region in Nova Scotia, but if we look at the population of those over 65 in general, they tend to be doing quite well in relation to this data set.
Yeah, perfect. And Tina's asking, what is the average age of participants in this age category? So how would you define older adults?
So this group would be over 65. And I would say that the average age for this, for like 65 and up, does tend to be in the lower range. Like there wasn't many people in their 80s really answering the survey, or 90s or more. So I would say the average would be quite skewed, so that it would be in the probably 65 to 70 range. So maybe recently retired.
Perfect. And Jen has offered communities to maintain protective factors, maintaining or building connected communities, having communities that are walkable, sidewalks, walking paths, bike paths, and that. So I think one thing when I see this data, Taylor, around older adults, and it's very favorable, that older adults are reporting in this particular survey that their quality of life is quite good. And sometimes that makes us feel like, oh, okay, we don't need to do anything then, like it's all good. But maintaining, like Jenna says, is so important to ensure that we're not reacting, and that. And Duncan asks, what was the gender mix of this group? So for older adults, do you have a sense of what that looks like?
So we asked both sex and gender, and there was a bit of a low disclosure rate, so they're generally equal. So in the gender category, it was nearly equal proportions of women and men, with a very small, very small amount of people who disclose that they don't identify as either of those groups. And in terms of sex, it was almost equally male and female, so about 50-50.
Right. Okay. I will keep my eye on the chat, folks. And
okay, great.
Let's move forward, and because I think the next case study we're talking about is newcomers.
Yes, thank you. And then I just noticed that Bettina put one more question in, which I'm glad you asked that. We are going to resurvey in 2024. So we're preparing for that now, and we'll be able to see how these groups changed over time, almost like a pre and post pandemic, if you consider 2024 to be post pandemic. Okay, so what I'm going to show next is newcomers, and there's a couple different ways that we could define the group newcomers. So because I said our demographic group's quite large, we could have included those who were new to Canada, those new to their community. What we ended up going with is what the Canadian Index of Wellbeing uses in their definition. So we adopted that as well. So we generally are talking about those who are new to the community in 5 years or less. And so this doesn't mean that someone just moved to Nova Scotia or just moved to Canada. This could mean moving from Dingwall to Dartmouth. So just any sort of general change in the region of Nova Scotia that you live in. Another reason why we go with this operationalization instead of new to Canada is because the amount of people who filled out the survey who are new to Canada is quite small. So their answers aren't really statistically reliable in terms of what the actual population is. So we use this definition instead. So the two protective factors that we found in the literature, one is being socially integrated in a culturally competent community, and we found that they are slightly less likely to report having a sense of belonging to the community, and also less likely to feel that people will help them in case of need. So that's kind of mirroring, the opposite mirroring older adults. They also report that it's more difficult to connect with others, and they also report higher frequencies of experiencing discrimination due to ethnicity, culture, race, or skin color. So there are some issues here in terms of being able to feel like you can join this community and connect with others. And so with this in mind, there's kind of another interesting piece here that those who are new to the community actually engage in recreation and leisure much higher at a much higher rate than the rest of Nova Scotia, but they still feel this lower social integration and belonging. So they are 20 to 40% more likely to report attending festivals and going to see movies and going to museums and art galleries. They're more likely to report surfing on the web for more than 5 hours per week or socializing online. Yet they are 30 to 50% more likely to report lacking companionship, more likely to report feeling left out and feeling isolated from others and feeling lonely. So there's this kind of interesting nuance here where they do really engage in community recreation and leisure. They're going out and doing things. They're making these efforts to connect with people, but it seems like they're still reporting lower social integration in the community. So with that in mind, I'm hoping anyone who has a thought or reflection or comment on that wouldn't mind sharing it with us in the chat.
Yeah, what's coming up for me, Taylor, is how important it is for communities to organize things for newcomers to participate in, and create space for those to not only participate in the activity per se, but also connect socially. So, the activity may be, for example, I'm thinking like, I'll just throw something out there, like a soccer game, right? So we're going to organize like a soccer tournament, and, there's a time before the soccer game, the time after the soccer game, maybe to have some refreshments, talk, chit chat, and connect with others. So we're not just task orientated with our activities, but also building relationships there. Right.
Another interesting piece that comes up with this group is that they are the most frequent users of public libraries in communities across our sample, which is interesting because, if you think about that as like a knowledge hub, that might be a nice place to situate any sort of programs or services or interventions, that sort of thing.
Yeah, great point. And Duncan asks, how does programming shift to participatory connection time? Right.
I'm not sure I 100% understand the question. Is it to do with like going from the soccer game to actually creating space for people to connect? Yeah, not sure if I fully understand the question.
Yeah.
Okay.
Duncan says you got it.
Yeah, so interestingly, we had a meeting last week with a group of people who are interested in creating a newcomer sport academy where you help people, youth who have just come to Nova Scotia from outside of Canada to join sports and recreation, and then you create the space for that connection to happen. So an example of that is one of the ideas that are floating around is that when the youth are in the sport, whether that's some sort of group activity or it's an actual team or a league or it's that sort of thing, that the parents are given a bit of a kind of information download on here's where to go if you're looking to get a driver's license here, here's where to go if you want more information on schools. And you almost have this double-pronged approach where the children or the youth are engaging in this activity that we know is good for you, and then the parents are also being given resources and support for any information they might need to further integrate into the community.
Yeah, great example. Erin just makes note of how sometimes we see ourselves on the East Coast as a very friendly and welcoming communities. And so this is a really interesting perspective for those that are actually new to communities that we could be doing some work there. And Tina's asking, were there any questions to ask participants to identify as introvert or extrovert, or how that might have influenced their responses?
Yeah, there's no questions in personality. I guess you could create profiles in general on how much people engage in the community. So leisure and culture is our second biggest domain, and we have extremely detailed information about how many hours people spend doing different activities, how often in the past week, month, or year they've attended different activities and events in their community. So we could hypothetically look at those who tend to do more social activities and look at differences that way, but there's no direct questions about personality types.
Perfect. And I'm seeing some love for Susie's comment here on focus on accessible community spaces to gather with a focus on supporting intergenerational relationship building. We need spaces to gather and support that are not bars. All right, which I've heard this in other communities as well. Susie's talking in CBRM, such things are scarce if even present. And I've heard that sentiment around Nova Scotia as well in our rural communities, that there's a lack of free space and open space to gather. Thinking of newcomers, having some sort of events which focus on stories, narratives exchanged as a way to intentionally build relationships. So that's a beautiful idea, Susie. I love that.
Yeah, I really like the idea of stories and narratives being exchanged. Really interesting idea for sure.
Yeah, yeah. And on where it says, it sounds like the old welcome wagon concept for those that remember that, but that time when there was a welcome wagon and we used to welcome people into our communities with baskets and
I've seen that on Gilmore Girls, but not in real life.
Make that into a reality. Good, perfect. Okay, Taylor, we're getting just past the half an hour there, and or 12 o'clock there. So let's move into you're going to give us some insight, particularly on the northern coast. So we kind of looked at it from a populations perspective in different communities, and now we'll take a little geographical approach to understanding the data. So what have we learned about the northern zone?
So in terms of the northern zone, what I did was I went on the well-being mapping tool and I grouped together roughly what I think the northern zone is by looking at the northern zone map with Nova Scotia Health. So recognizing that these are FSAs, so it doesn't kind of cleanly map onto the zones. It's not as granular as postal code. But it does roughly capture the number of people that we have in this area. So one of the questions that stood out to me when I was looking through this, so this is comparing those who are in that highlighted orange area to the rest of the province. So you can see that in this kind of screenshot of this bar graph below, the total number of answers, so the comparison group, is just over 12,000. And then the number of people that I've been able to capture in the northern zone is just over 2,000. So I was looking at the question of how satisfied someone is with their sense of belonging to the community. And one reason why I looked at this is because we have questions about your sense of belonging, but then we also have this question about, how happy are you with that sense of belonging, which is really what it all comes down to. You can have a certain level of sense of belonging, but what I think really matters is if you're happy with that sense of belonging you have. And so looking at the difference between the kind of region that I've selected as well as the province overall, we can see that roughly the northern zone is about neutral, and the province overall is higher than that. They're somewhat satisfied with their sense of belonging to the community. And this question gets asked on a scale of 1 to 7, where 1 is not at all and 7 is extremely satisfied. So a neutral would be somewhere in the midpoint. And we can see that about a quarter of people reported that they are neither satisfied nor dissatisfied. And that about 10% of people actually did say they were dissatisfied with their sense of belonging to the community. And then the other piece that I have in terms of the northern zone, so similar to the way that I displayed the results earlier, this is comparing those groups, those people to the rest of Nova Scotia. And what we see is that they're less likely to report engaging in physical exercise and reporting that they have good physical health. Air quality was a big issue. This was also at the same time as like the pulp mill issues. There's concerns with quality and access of healthcare services, with access to courses of interest in terms of education. They also go to the movie theater less, go to visual arts facilities less, and much more private car, using your own car rather than taking public transit as well, which is in the environment domain. So these are the experiences and circumstances that people tend to report. These are the ways in which the northern zone differs the most from the rest of the province. So essentially, I looked at where the biggest differences are, and these are the top biggest differences when comparing this region to the rest of Nova Scotia.
Okay, perfect. Yeah, it's always interesting hearing kind of like, I think people, when I'm talking to folks, they want to know what's going on in their communities. How is this relevant? You know, what can we be doing? So I think it's great to have that perspective as well of what it looks like. Perfect. So Taylor has her email address there. So if you want to reach out and find out more information, as you can see, Taylor has a wealth of information on this data. I don't know how you capture and understand it all, because there is, as I think you said, over 300 data points, Taylor.
300,000 data points. Yeah, it's taken a couple years.
So brilliant how you were able to answer some of those questions and just know off the top of your head, you know, have a sense of what that looks like. So we're just at about 10 after 12. So I do want to hand it over to Blair. And if you're kind of wondering, okay, what do we do with this? And I'm going to highlight Blair here. Blair into the spotlights here. And Blair's here to help us understand, okay, so Taylor's going to give us a walkthrough of the data, what it looks like, what the potential is. And Blair is the brilliant person at Engage Nova Scotia that can help us really get connected and understand how this work can connect with what we're doing in our communities and support that. So the Engage Nova Scotia has created a position to help us navigate through this and support this. And so I'm going to hand it over to you, Blair. And I think I also need to make you a co-host here.
Yeah, thank you so much. Wondering if you're actually able to share that slide. My Zoom never seems to let it work. If not, I can also just speak to it.
Yes, let me just get over there. Perfect. Okay, hold on.
Thank you so much.
Excellent. All right. And I will share my screen here. Anything to make folks' jobs easier, right?
Yeah, thank you. Really appreciate that.
All right. Perfect. All right. So tell me if I got it right. Blair, is this what we're looking for?
That is what we're looking for. And I'm sorry to folks in advance. I'm aware that there's a lot of text on there, but I'll speak to all those points. And yeah, just wanted to start by saying thanks for inviting me to share a bit more about some offerings that Engage has to actually support some work that might be emerging related to some of the data that Taylor shared. And I had to jump on a bit late, but was really eager to kind of click through some of the chats that were coming up, or comments coming up in the chat around kind of what possible programs and services could we see surfacing related to some of the data that came out. So there's kind of two opportunities that I want to share with you, that one on the left-hand side of that slide and one on the right, and I'll try to keep it high level, always an open invite to reach out to me to learn more about either of them. So the first kind of offering, as we call it, through Engage's SDG program that I want to share with you more about is what we've just been calling the partnership opportunity. And it's not a super buzzy title, but that's really because the projects that emerge out of it are the things that we want to highlight more than the fact that we have an opportunity to do those things together. Essentially, what this partnership opportunity is a place to work with Engage to really help spring forward some community projects or ideas that you may have that are all about improving quality of life and well-being for Nova Scotians, which as we know by going through the data set, that is so broad. There are so many different things that we know lead to the improvement of people's quality of life and overall well-being. So really any sort of idea that you may have would fit into this really nicely. One thing that is kind of an important thing to note right off the top of the bat is that could be a new idea. So something that your community organization, a business, community health board, or a group of volunteers or yourself individually wants to surface. It could be new to you, or it could be a pre-existing project that you're kind of looking to scale up and take to the next level. And I would say the main way that we actually support folks in doing that, either new idea emergence or scaling up, is through a facilitated process, or what we've been calling our participatory engagement path. And that's the kind of brown road visual that you're seeing on the left-hand side of the screen. Essentially, along that path where you can see it takes you from visioning all the way through to action, we have a few offerings for our partners. The first is trying to find new ways to bring community voice and perspectives into the planning of an action that would come out at the end. So what that looks like in practice is Engage will be your kind of number one engagement and facilitation support. Obviously, the data is a huge part of what we do at Engage, but we're an engagement organization at our core. That's what our history lies in. So that's one way that we would be able to support you in getting new perspectives into your project planning. The second, which is the data, is we're able to actually help you identify local data that would be relevant to your idea and actually test out how having access to local information can shape the actions that come out at the end. So snippets of what Taylor would have shared with you here are things that we can actually go a little bit deeper into in a partnership together, really in that vein of informing the project that comes out at the end. And then the last thing, and the thing that I think folks tend to get gravitated towards, and we try not to center, is the financial aid. So the project that actually is going to come out of the end of working through this process together, we have some financial support to help you get there. And one thing that we think is kind of unique about this partnership opportunity is we don't define financial support until we're actively in partnership together, because we don't believe that we're able to give a fair price, if we even want to call it that, to the thing that you're trying to do until we're a little bit deeper into working into it together. So financial aid is a large component of the partnership opportunity to actually give you the runway to take this project and launch it off the ground, but will come kind of later down the line when we're having a clear understanding after working together through that pathway of what's actually needed to bring your project up to success. And maybe I wanted to give like the quickest example of a project that actually emerged out of this that relates to the two focus communities that Taylor was sharing data on, which is seniors or older adults and newcomers, sorry. And we actually underwent a partnership with a group called Spencer House, based in Halifax, to launch an idea that they had around, we know that there's lots of folks in these two communities, as Taylor pointed us to, who are experiencing social isolation and lack of feeling of community and sense of belonging. And what would it look like to actually try to build a project out that is going against some of those things that we know to be true about these groups? And what emerged was this idea called the Buddy Project, which essentially is a pairing project that would bring a senior in the community or an older adult in the community into partnership and pairing with a newcomer in the community, all about sharing stories and ideas, which was something I was seeing emerging in the chat, centering relationship building and connection, and actually doing things together in our communities that make us feel more connected to it. So in partnership with them, we kind of took them through that path, hosted visioning and ideation sessions with members of both of those communities to kind of get their input into what could this project look like. We shared this sort of data that Taylor would have presented to you earlier with the groups as well to say, how does this help inform where we land? And they're actually in their rollout phase now. So launching their first rounds of buddies, which is just a really exciting thing to see happen. And that's one example of the work that we're doing, but there's so many more. So I won't go into them a ton, but always eager to chat about them a bit more. Maybe just to put a final pin on the partnership opportunity, we accept applications to that on a rolling basis, really trying to be emergent and responsive to our partners' needs. So at any point in time, if something's bubbling up for you, maybe it was sparked by the data that Taylor shared, you can reach out to me. I'll put my email in the chat as well, and we can kind of walk through what it may look like to be in partnership together. Yeah, I'll just transition over to the second opportunity that I want to talk about, which is a bit more in that research vein. And this is a new opportunity that's actually coming live this month, which is a partnership that we've undertaken with Clary, or the Change Lab Action Research Initiative, which some of you folks may be aware of already. But really the purpose of our partnership is to do what Clary does best, and that's connect community groups with researchers across Nova Scotia to fund community-directed research. So really this opportunity is for all community groups, which we kind of define as nonprofits, charities, volunteer groups, social enterprises. But if you're kind of unsure if you would fit under that umbrella, you can always reach out to us and we can chat that through together. So if you're a community group and you're interested in research that's related to your work, the things that you are doing, local well-being data, so some of the things that Taylor shared above, and perhaps also the relationship between your work and the UN Sustainable Development Goals. Both of these opportunities are under our Sustainable Development Goals project, and those are very broad. So again, any sort of thing that you're imagining that you could do that connects to quality of life and well-being probably also relates to the Sustainable Development Goals there. So that is kind of the one condition that we need, is that you're a community group and you're interested in learning a bit more. What ends up happening then is we will help, with support of Clary, pair you with an academic research partner who will get $7,500 to help you carry out your research project. Part of that will look like going deeper into quality of life data. So things that Taylor shared here with you today, we can go a bit deeper in, but also other information that may feel helpful as you're imagining how to continue to do the kind of work that you do. This is a new opportunity for us. It's starting this month. And again, we're doing a rolling basis submission. However, the only kind of caveat on this one is we're only able to support 4 projects. So we're going to do a rolling application until the 4 projects are confirmed, and more to come on those when they're done. So if you have any questions about either of these 2 opportunities, we're really keen to find ways to help you take some of the information that you're learning today, take your experiences of living in the communities that you do and the knowledge you have already from there, and actually help you action some projects and get deeper into some research. And again, I'll flip my email into that chat, so you can always reach out to me. And yeah, thank you so much for giving me the chance to share about some ways to get involved in Engage's work a little deeper.
Right. Okay, I'm going to stop sharing now so I can see everybody again. All right, Blair, that was amazing. You did a super job of giving us a lot of understanding of what the opportunities are in a very short time there. Any questions that anybody has for Taylor or Blair around the Engage Nova Scotia quality of life data, the opportunities that can come to use this data? Perfect. So as people are kind of thinking about that and maybe typing things into the chat, I just wanted to say that, you know, my hope is that we have spurred some curiosity for folks in community to engage with this data. And specifically, my interest is around community suicide prevention. So as I mentioned, we do have very little understanding of how communities' response and the way that we support those in our community who are contemplating or grieving from suicide, what community's response looks like and what is the most effective way to help support people. So there's lots of things to learn and understand. And I think one of the challenges coming into this work and coming into this space is that there is no prescribed way of doing it. There's no one way of doing it. There is no magic wand or solution, and that it does take a lot of communication and understanding and connection with folks to really appreciate what's happening in their context to know how to move forward with the work of Roots of Hope. So if anybody is interested in exploring these opportunities that Blair has talked about, to dive deeper in the data that Taylor was so helpful in helping us understand, if you would like to connect with me about that, I would be more than happy to have more conversation and see what is possible. I know that we have a lot of people working in health promotion in our space today as well. So if there's other things that come to mind for you during this conversation and you would like to explore those things, then you can still reach out to me and I'm more than happy to help. But Taylor and Blair are, you know, experts in their field, and I think they'd be very excited to help you navigate what this could look like moving forward. Perfect. So Taylor, any last thoughts come from you?
Yeah, I just wanted to also mention that, so as you know, we're resurveying in 2024. So we have a freakishly long list of questions to revise and add and edit to the survey. So always accepting feedback. So if you have any thoughts or questions you'd like to see on the survey, send them along. We'll be going through those in the next year and getting ready for the survey.
Excellent. Yeah. And we would like to encourage people to take the survey and
Please.
complete the survey. The bigger the data set, the better we have understanding and can use that data. Blair, any other thoughts coming from you before we go today?
No, thank you though, again, for allowing us to come in and share. We're always eager to connect with you. So please don't hesitate to reach out to either Taylor and I, and we're happy to talk more about Engage's work.
Perfect. Yes. Lovely folks at Engage for sure. And yeah, it's always a pleasure talking to you. I've met several of the staff there. Okay, Tina has a question before we go. Are both programs strictly research-based, or can they support community initiatives that would help improve well-being? So I think, Blair, that's for you.
Yeah, no, not both strictly research-based. I would say the partnership opportunity, although it involves elements of bringing local data in, it's really about advancing your project ideas that would be related to supporting community well-being. So data certainly plays an element in how we imagine it may shape the actual actions that come out at the end of working together, but it's really centered on the idea that you would have and how best we could help bring it to life through community voice as a really central piece to that as well.
Amazing. I think it's such a valuable way to help reinforce sometimes the things that we know in our community, things that we feel that we should be done, and give that bit of evidence, especially if we were applying for funding and this sort of thing, to say that this is an area that needs support. Perfect. And I just wanted to bring people's attention to, I just put a link there for the evaluation for today's talk. And so if people wouldn't mind clicking on that link before you go, I will send it out as an email as well. And when the recording is ready to go, I will send out the recording to folks, along with some of the resources, that Taylor and Blair had mentioned, just so that people can have those to reflect back on. So thank you so much, Taylor and Blair. Wishing you all the best for the rest of the day. And thank you so much for your time today. And hopefully we'll be getting connected soon and continue our conversations.
Thanks so much.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Okay, bye-bye.